topic called investing in yourself, both from a spiritual perspective and a practical perspective. There's some questions that I would love to get Ananda's insights on, as this is a topic that holds quite dear to both of us. And we'll do that for the next 25 to 30 minutes. And then for the last 10, 15 minutes, we'll open it up to the audience to share any questions or reflections that maybe have come about in the last 20 to 25 minutes. And I know it's virtual, so no pressure, but if there's a couple of you that can turn on your videos, it would be great. I know for Ananda and myself, but no pressure whatsoever. So Ananda, thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. I guess to get us started and to kind of open up the conversation, from your perspective, what does the term invest in yourself actually mean?
Hi everyone, Hare Krishna. What we'll try to do today, or my responses, I'll try to keep them very brief and very succinct. I'll try. I don't know how successful I'll be, but I'll try to keep it brief and succinct. So to kick things off here, investing in yourself really means understanding who you really are. Because when we understand who we really are, then we can understand our purpose. Anytime we get, like, just think about the last time you bought a gadget, right? The reason why you bought a gadget, the purpose that you're going to use the gadget for, you had a very clear purpose of why you're buying something, or at least we should, right? So just like how whenever we get something, there's a clear purpose that's attached to it that we want to use it for. Similarly, we have this life. And so for us to understand what is this life meant to actually be used for, how should we engage ourselves, we need to first understand who we are. Once we understand who we are, our identity, then we can understand our purpose. And then once we understand our identity and purpose, then that allows for execution. And so then we can actually start to live a life of meaning, live a life of happiness, live a life of tranquility. And so when somebody says, "Oh, I really want to invest in myself," I really break it down to three things: identity, purpose, and then, of course, its execution.
Okay, thank you. I guess building a little bit off of that, everyone will have a different perception of what their purpose is in life. There's an individual purpose, and then I think there's, if I can say, there's a collective purpose, in terms of, the standard purpose nowadays is you go to school, you get a good job, you establish a family, and that's kind of how you go about living your life. So can you speak a little bit, when you talk about terms such as identity and purpose and execution, what does that actually mean to you from a Bhakti Yoga perspective? And what does that look like for us in this day and age?
Yeah, let me actually share my screen here. Let's see if this works. Oh, perfect. Can you all see my screen? If I type something? Yeah, okay, perfect. And then if I write something here, are you seeing it on your end?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So in our life, according to the Vedic text, the ancient Vedic texts that are 5,000 years old and still have a lot of like wisdom and relevance for us to actually utilize, it talks about two aspects, or sort of two arms of what it means to have purpose. The first arm is called something called Swadharma. Dharma, there are various sort of meanings for it. This is in the ancient Sanskrit language. Dharma can mean duty, but depending on the context in which it is used, it can also mean purpose. So Swadharma literally means the duties or the purpose that we have, as you described, in this world when it comes to our career, our education, the partner we choose to spend our life with, the type of personality traits, skills we want to develop. So that is known as Swadharma. right? The activities that we do in relation to this world, in relation to the people around us. But beyond this, there's actually another dharma, and that is called Sanatana Dharma. So hence, if you the Sanatan Dharma Prabhu or Sanatan Dharma Das. So Sanatan Dharma means or relates to the purpose that we have between ourselves and divinity, and the purpose in relation between you can say, the living being or the entity or the personality, so me, you, whoever, and a higher entity, a higher energy, or divinity for simplistic sake. So when we think about purpose, everyone seems to hit and really go after the swadharma, right? You can say the purpose within this world and how we engage with this world. There's so many books on this aspect, right? Start with your why. And there's another book, like on relationships as well, that help you define good relationships, good partners, the five love languages. So there are lots of self-help books around our swadharma, right? Our purpose within this world. But there's not too much emphasis or knowledge about the Sanatan Dharma or the purpose when it comes to our spiritual selves, our spiritual sort of purpose. And so when I talk about investing or trying to figure out your purpose, and the reason why I say is first you have to start with your identity is when you realize your inherent traits, your inherent personalities, your inherent quirks, things that irk you a little bit, or the way you start to think, that helps you define your swadharma. So that helps you define the types of careers you want to go into, the type of people you want to hang out with, the type of partners and the values you look for in a partner. But beyond that identity, beyond just our identity in terms of our personality, for lack of better word, there's also an identity on a spiritual level. We also have identity at a spiritual scale. When we start to understand that, then we start to engage in Sanatana Dharma, or the purpose that actually has a spiritual sort of foundation built into it. And so when we talk about purpose, the one thing that I would encourage everyone on this call to actually pay attention to is just not purpose when it comes to um, your what you're doing in the world, but also the purpose that comes when you're trying to connect with divinity. What does that look like? What do those connections look like? What does that relationship look like? What type of practices can you get into to really foster that relationship? So those are the two things that's when I say purpose, this is what I mean. Really investing in our Swadharma and Sanatan Dharma.
Okay. I guess, can you talk a little bit, in modern day, we often see the term our inner self, our authentic self. There's a lot of these catchphrases that are tossed around.
Mhm.
And so can you talk a little bit about what that looks like from a Bhakti yoga perspective? Is that what you're referring to as our spiritual identity when we talk about phrases like our inner self and our authentic self?
Right. So when we talk about our what we're really pertaining to in that question is like what of these descriptions, what is our true inner identity, right? So let's think about the word identity even before we get there. Identity, there's so many different types of layers that we have. We have our weekend identity, and then we have our weekday identity, right? On a weekend, we might be totally different, laid back, chilled out on the couch, compared to our weekday or a Monday identity. We have an identity we can have an identity towards our friends. We can have an identity at work, and then we can have an identity in our personal life with our family, with our partners, with you can say, at the temple as well, in our communities, right? We can have a political identity, we can have a gender identity, we can have a sexual identity, so many different types of identities. But all of these identities really like if you were to group them, it really comes down to three groupings. The first grouping is what I like to call our physical identity. So physical identity, if someone were to ask you, who are you, right? You would say, my name is such and such. I'll speak for myself. My name is Ananda Das. I am a heterosexual Indian male that is, who is 34 years old, 5'7", 70 kilos, like all of that, that is aspect of it. All of those, what I've just listed, all of that constitutes my identity in a part of who I am, right? It's their characteristics relating to me, to the self, but they're on a physical level, right? We know that in today's day and age, even like, let's say complexion wise, we can change our complexion with skin grafts and plastic surgery. We can change our facial structure. We can change, nowadays, we can even change our height. So almost everything about our physical identity can be changed, right? When we are younger, we have a completely different physical identity than the physical identity that we have now. But so physical identity, it's a part of us, but because it's changing, it's not really our true self. Because if it was our true self, then it wouldn't really change throughout our life, right? Even though our body changes, if you say my body is changing, sure, the body's changing, but then there's another, even linguistically, there's the word my in there. And so that person is still staying constant as the body changes. So physical identity, it's changing. So let's go to the next grouping, which is I would say, psychological identity, right? I'm not going to write the entire word out. So psychological identity. Psychological identity pertains to our perspectives, our values, how we think, right? My psychological identity is, I am studious. I like to read. I like to take apart things. I'm not so, whereas my wife, she's very practical. She's very process oriented. She's very efficient. She likes to just, everything needs to come down to efficiency. Um, my psychological identity is I am, I like I have you can say a tendency towards leadership, towards management. My wife has a tendency towards generate like just being part of the crowd, being in the background, not really being in the spotlight. So that's their psychological identity. Psychological identity, again, that can be changed through training, through being put in certain situations. We know of ourselves and of other people too, may not be leaders themselves, but when they're put in this position, they assume that leadership position. So psychological identity can also be changed. But again, the person behind who has that psychological identity stays constant. So who is the person behind the physical and psychological identity? And that's when we get to the third and most deepest layer, which is our spiritual identity. Spiritual identity. A spiritual identity, if you think about it, that's the one constant in our life. No matter what our state of our body is, no matter what our state of our psyche is, the person behind the body, the psyche, is still staying constant. You are still the same person that you were when you were 5 kilos, when you were 10 kilos, now 20, 30, whatever. You're still that same person who your psychology as a kid is very different to what your psychology is now. So even despite all these bodily and psychological changes, you have still stayed you have still stayed the same person. So what is that? And that is the core of our idea of, when you say of a true self, it really comes down to this portion right here. the spiritual identity. In the ancient Vedic texts, we hear from the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says that beyond this body, beyond the psyche, is actually a spiritual identity. It's a soul. And even on a practical level, let's actually make this more social and more relatable. You see in today's day and age, you see what's happening in Canada, you see what's happening in the States, where there's so much division based on the color of your skin, based on your political identity, your the party that you support, based on even whether you're a vegan or not a vegan. There's so much, you know, there's so much segregation, and yet every single person is actually yearning for connection, is yearning to actually find the similarity despite these differences so that they can connect to them. And people do find those similarities. How can people find something so similar when everything about their physical and psyche is completely different? The reason is because people are not connecting on these two levels, but they're actually connecting through their spiritual identity. They're recognizing that, yes, even though physically and mentally we may be totally different, but at the end of the day, I'm a soul and so are you. And based on that similarity, that's what forms that emotional spiritual connection. And so when we talk about the real self, according to ancient, and it's just not Eastern theology or Eastern wisdom, it is even, you can say, like, even if when we look at Abrahamic religion, so Christianity, Islam, they talk about this concept of a soul that actually transcends all these various physical or psychological external identities. So that, according to logic, as well as with, as well as philosophical theory and philosophical realization, our true self is the spiritual identity. It is the soul. That was a very long-winded answer to your relatively simple question, but I hope you got the context as well.
Yeah, no, I actually really appreciate that because you walked us through the different layers and you walked us through practical examples as to how we can identify with each layer and then go a layer deeper in really understanding ourselves. I guess my follow-up question to that is, how does one go about cultivating a mood or an understanding of how to understand this whole spiritual identity process that you've just mentioned? If someone is
Mhm.
completely foreign to bhakti yoga, what are some simple practical steps that one can take to really cultivate that mood of understanding who they actually are at their core?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to answer that is the easiest way to answer that is just taking an inventory and taking like just understanding how do we approach any new topic in this world. If you go to school, if you go to work, well, actually, let's hear from the audience. If there's anyone, I see there's some people on their phone, there's some people logging in. Maybe they can put it in the chat. If you are to learn something new, what are some ways that you go about it? You want to put it in the chat? You Google it. Okay. But okay, so Nandini says you Google it. Once you Google it, I hope you're also reading about it, right? Or you research, same thing. You research it, but then you read the research that you're putting, right? Okay. You ask others. Perfect. Anything else? I see Amandeep here, Krishna Kumar. Anyone, uh, anyone else that they want to put in comments? Okay, I mean, you can get the you can get the responses coming in. I'll take these two. So Google and researching it. So let's take those two for example. So by Google or research, I mean it's the same thing. You use Google to conduct your research, and I hope once you've conducted that research, you're actually reading what is out there. So in one sense, you're actually reading about it. You're trying to understand it from a theoretical standpoint that, okay, how do I actually do this job? And you read, you understand it from a theoretical standpoint. So that is the first step into actually trying to understand our spiritual identity. The first step is uh, literally understanding the theory behind this, understanding the knowledge behind this, reading about this. We have so many various spiritual texts now that have been converted from Sanskrit to English, where we can actually go and read, and not just English, but thousands of other languages around the world, whether it be Arabic, whether it be Farsi, whether it be, as I said, English, and even like the Indian languages like Hindi, Malayalam, Tamil, Punjabi, and then all around the world, French, Spanish. There's so all over, you can say, Vedic knowledge is being converted into so many different texts that we have access to. So the first step into all of this is actually just reading about it and understanding what is the theory behind all this. So that would be the first step. So the first step I would say is read, right? Understand the theory behind it. And then once you understand the theory, the next step that at least I usually do is I try to say that, okay, in the book, I'll use a very simple example. If let's use a simple example of building IKEA furniture. The first thing that you do is you look at the IKEA booklet that comes, and in IKEA you don't have to read it, but you still have to follow the pictures along to understand what it's being done. And then what do? You try to say that, okay, this is what is written in the book, this is the theory. Let me actually try and go put that theory into practice. So I actually move pieces around and you attach them here and there. You screw it and you screw various screws in and everything. So the second step naturally is also the practical application of what you have read. So and this is where I'll spend a little bit more time. So what happens is, let's say you go read, to understand this concept, you go read the Bhagavad Gita and you say that, okay, it says that you're not this body, you're the soul. In order for you to understand that, you can practice meditation. So then you go and you practice meditation and you put it into practical application. When you do, like with anything, like with just assembling furniture through IKEA, you'll follow the first page. You'll put everything together on the first page. And then you'll be like, okay, I have gotten the first page down. I see elements of the furniture coming together, but I now need to know how to move past this, and I don't know how to move past. So then what you do, you go back, you read the second page, and then you apply as well. So really, to understand our spiritual identity, to cultivate understanding of our spiritual identity is no different. It's just about cycling between these two aspects where we read about it, we read the theory behind it, we try to understand what do the ancient Vedic scriptures, what is the ancient wisdom telling us. We try and implement it, and then once we implement it, we come across a few more realizations, or we try to ask ourselves, are we doing it right? And we go back and read it. The one great thing about spiritual practice, and this is a catalyst. Imagine if when you're putting the IKEA furniture together, you had sometimes those images, they can get a bit confusing. I know because I just assembled furniture this week, and if you've ever assembled furniture on IKEA, they'll just show like the slab of wood going forward, but there are three sides that are polished, and then there's one that is unpolished. Now, the one that is unpolished is supposed to go towards the back. Well, yours truly put it in the front, and then I didn't realize it until I had it complete, and I was like, that does not look right. And then I had to go back and I did it again, and instead of it taking me like an hour, assembling it took me two. Now that would have been a lot easier if someone who was expert in putting IKEA furniture was standing right beside me and immediately could have pointed it out and said, actually, no, 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 you have it wrong. Reverse the wood slab and do it this way. Immediately I would have gotten it. And that's what actually this aspect, the one that Malvika put in the chat, asking others, is such a catalyst for trying to understand any type of information, whether it's spiritual or material. And this is, and I'm just going to put this here. So asking others. What this aspect does, and I'll just put it here too, asking others. What this aspect does is it actually acts as a catalyst so that what you're reading, you can understand it in a very easily digestible manner, but then you can also apply it very efficiently and in the right way. And that process of reading and applying, it just churns out results at a much more efficient rate when you have when you have an experienced practitioner, like in this case, Sanatana Dharma, there to help you through it. And so when you do that, your practice, your your quest, in one sense, for your spiritual identity becomes a lot more efficient, becomes a lot more faster. So this is a very simple model. It's not rocket science. We do the same thing in universities, we do the same thing in schools, where we have the textbook, we have the notes, but we often have friends, we have our professors, we have our teachers who we can go to. And then when we get to the final year, or when we start doing internship, that is the practical application of our theoretical knowledge. And that's how we build skills, that's how we build experience, and that's how knowledge truly becomes realized. So that would be my you can say model behind using that.
Okay. One last question before we open it up really to whoever else wants to share something or reflect anything that Ananda has shared in the last 30 minutes or so. I'm curious to know, from your perspective, it seems that you've been practicing Bhakti yoga for a really long time. You've been churning for a really long time. Is there a cost for someone who doesn't decide to invest in themselves from a spiritual perspective? And if there is a cost, what does that cost look like?
So I personally don't see it as a cost. So because a cost is something that is taken away from you, right? So let's say you have $5 and it costs $3, so you're losing $3. But what if by not practicing this quest, or by not pursuing this quest of spiritual exploration, it's not that you lose the $3, is that you don't get an additional $5. So it's not necessarily a cost, it's more about losing the opportunity to make more. Imagine if your life, just think about it, right? We go to school, we invest so much in you can say, in trying to assimilate knowledge around this world and of the people of this world, and how to interact in this world. And so that gets us some return on our investments. For example, we get $10 back. But what a lot of people don't realize is there's still $90 waiting for them if they were to pursue their spiritual quest that they never actually capitalize on. And so the $10 that they do get, they feel that that's all in all, but nobody actually looks behind the curtain to see that there's actually a lot more waiting for them in the back. So I don't necessarily think of this as a cost per se, but I see this as not having utilized the additional benefits that are awaiting you. So yeah, that's how I would say it. It's not necessarily a cost, it's just a missed opportunity to make even more sense of your life, even more sense of your existence, and to really get even more juice from this beautiful gift that we have called life.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I guess before I jump in and ask and reflect some of the things that I was thinking about in the last 30 minutes, I wanted to see if anyone else wanted to kind of share a question or share anything that was on their mind to kind of kick us off. I see Nandini's video came on, so I'm assuming she might want to share something.
Yes, Hare Krishna, I can share something. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you, Ananda Madhava Prabhu, for doing this and having this meeting with us and hosting and answering these questions. I really appreciate your examples. I think they're actually like very practical. They're easy to understand now, versus just going so deep into like the scriptures and the texts and then not making it relatable back. So I like your IKEA examples because it's a pretty good example. I wanted to actually ask a question in regards to consistency and if there is a lack of consistency in wanting to develop a more spiritual or have that connection with your spiritual identity. Just because I sometimes find with myself personally that, we always make up excuses like, oh, I don't have enough time, or other things unfortunately take more precedence or are more of a priority. And maybe that's the answer itself, is that it should be more of a priority and we just are not prioritizing it. But then again, like if it's lack of consistency and lack of priority, how would you go about encouraging people to put it as more of a priority to develop that spiritual identity?
Yeah, no, thank you for asking that. It's something that, to be honest, we all struggle with. Just having consistent dedication to our spiritual goals, our spiritual vows. And so first, let's actually unpack why we struggle with it. Why can't we just be consistent with it, right? And it's a very simple example, actually, a very simple analogy I'd like to use. When we go to the gym, if we do it right, we can actually start seeing results within 2 weeks, maybe a month, 4 weeks at max, right? But within 2 weeks, we start to notice something. And the other thing is we can actually measure, right? So if you go week one and you put all out, you give it your all, and you're able to hit maybe, okay, let's just say maybe you're able to hit 60 pounds on the bench press, right? 8 reps, 3 sets. If you come back the next week, you're like, okay, I have this measured. Let me try to see if I can do 65. And yeah, you'll probably be able to push to 65 if you, even within the next week when you come in, and it might not be 8 reps, it might be 6 reps, but you'll be able to do 65. And that gives you a little bit of motivation. And then you come back the third week and you progressively overload, right? So you see a result happening, and you see such an immediate reciprocation with your training that it keeps you motivated, keeps you going. And then after the first month, you actually start seeing physical changes. The second month, even more pronounced. Third month, people start to recognize you for that. So you say, wow, this process is really working, and you keep on going. Unfortunately, spiritual life isn't like that, right? It's not like if I chant for 1 week consistently, um, immediately in the second week, there might be a change, but it won't be that dramatic of a change. And so when we don't see those results happening so quickly, so abruptly, so you can say obviously, we of course get very demotivated. We get not demotivated, but we are like, I'm doing this, but I don't know if it's actually working. Because there's that lack of immediate reciprocation, of immediate, you can say, change in our lives, that it's not really, it can get very demotivating, right? So that's one of the, of course, there are lots of other reasons, but that's one reason that I personally find is difficult to stay consistent with our spiritual practices. However, there is hope. The hope is that, unlike a workout where, I mean, even with physicality, if you miss a gym day, it is said, if you've been training consistently, let's say for 8 weeks, and then you miss a week or 2 or 3, you can go up to 3 weeks from missing a workout if you've been consistently going for about 2 months to 3 months. And at the 3-week mark, you can retake that up and you'll be fine. Like, you won't lose too much muscle, right? Similarly, with the spiritual process, anytime we make the effort to actually pick up our spiritual practices, we will always be benefited. What I mean by that is, eventually, if you stop going to the gym, you will lose your muscle. With spiritual practices, that's not the case. Anytime you've done spiritual practice and then you've gone off the rails, then you've come back, just because you went off the rails does not negate the benefit that you got when you did that spiritual practice. That benefit continues to stay with you, not just in weeks, not just in months, but it is said in the ancient Vedic text that this happens for lifetimes. There's examples of personalities who were thoroughly spiritual in life A, and then they forgot about it in life B, and then in life C, it came back, and when they revived it, they got those same benefits. So that's one of the benefits of spiritual practice. Now, so point number 1 is that because we don't see immediate results, we get demotivated. It's difficult for us to stay consistent. Point number 2, however, even if we continue to do it, we will still get benefit even though we do it inconsistently. Now the third point is this. In a workout, you get the results right then and there. And then if you stop doing it for about 3 weeks, or if you will still be fine, but then if you stop doing it for 3 months, that's it, your gains are gone. But with spiritual life, as I mentioned, if you continue to do it even inconsistently, you'll still get a benefit for it. So imagine how much benefit you'll get. If you're already getting benefit from doing it inconsistently, imagine how much more benefit you'll get if you did it consistently. I know that's a weak point, but stay with me here. So if you have this in your mind, that if I continue to actually push, if I continue to stay determined and actually continue to practice spiritual benefit, and you start to apply this process of reading and going into practical application, what will happen is, even when you start to become inconsistent with the practical application, if you go back and you read the theory, because of whatever previous practical application you've done, the theory will actually give you the juice to come back to its practical application. If you stay firm with your practical application, but you're not really reading theory, the practical application will push you to eventually go back to theory as well. So the benefit of spiritual life, even though it might be inconsistent, is when we do these two things together, inconsistency in one or consistency in one will actually help us overcome the inconsistency in the other. The challenge becomes when there's inconsistency in both. And to that, I don't have an answer because I'm still struggling with it.
Thank you.
Point number 1 is, I guess that just try to be, I don't know what else to say. I mean, if anyone else, Krishna Kumar, or if Nandini, you have any, or I think this is being live streamed, so even, I don't know if we can check out those comments, but if anyone on the live stream has any thoughts and impact on how, if you become inconsistent with both the theory and the practice, if there's any way, then please do chime in. It will be enlightening for me as well. That's that. That's all I could say. Sorry.
No, I found that to be beneficial for me personally, because I feel like it does make sense if you're inconsistent in both, that it's a possibility. But I feel like if people who do genuinely want to put in more of an effort for at least one of them, will eventually be able to succeed in both. Like, obviously, there are people either in the live stream or in the group right now that have made it a priority to attend this lecture right now, even if it was a little bit. People still put in that effort. And so if that effort is continuously being put in, then eventually the consistency will happen in the other aspect as well. And I feel like it helps because we also have somebody like Sanatana Dharma who is giving us his knowledge. And so because he's so knowledgeable, and then there's a clear desire for everybody in these groups to want to learn something, then I feel like the consistency will pick up, because also it helps with a community of people. And if there's a community of people together, then you can always encourage and push others that are close to you to also stay consistent as well.
This is this principle here, asking others. That just catalyzes the entire process. So if we have others in the group and we are able to actually rely on the community, then yeah, you're right. That is the magic pill. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey, we got there at the end. Perfect. Any other questions or comments? I don't know when we go till, but yeah.
I think it was until 6:45. I think Molly had to leave at 6:30 or 6:35-ish, but I believe we go till 6:45.
Okay, I think it's 2 minutes, so either we can go with another last question, or we can, because I just wanted to make sure that I got to the closing announcements as well. Yeah, okay, maybe I'll just move on to the closing announcements. So yeah, just wanted to thank everyone who tuned in either to the YouTube or the Zoom page. I think just wanted to let you know that this is just a one-off. It's because Sanatana Dharma is traveling, but he will be back next week to resume his sessions on here. But other than that, I hope that anyone who's watching, or Nandini or Krishna Kumar, you found this helpful, and we shall see you soon then. Okay. Okay. Take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Krishna. Okay.